Welcome to Things I Wish I Knew, the podcast from Thinking Faith, a work of the Jesuits in Britain. I'm Julia, I'm in my early 30s, and I used to live in a Jesuit young adult community. We all live hectic lives and often don't get time to reflect on what's happening both to us and around us. This podcast is meant to help you to take a moment to stop and to think about where you are, where you're going, and where your relationship with God fits into it all. Every week I'll meet a new guest who tells me about something they experienced which has changed their lives forever. By talking about the things they wish they'd known at the time, we'll explore the idea that God is in all things, and we'll talk about the part that faith plays in navigating life challenges. Today I'm speaking to Edward, who grew up in London. He's passionate about social justice, and he works in public life. In this conversation, Edward talks about life growing up in Tottenham, going to a Jesuit school, and how that led him to be the man he is today, which is a man for others. For me, in this conversation, it's great for considering how faith, purpose, and lay leadership all work together. So, Edward, what was it like growing up in Tottenham?
I think there's a number of things that come to mind. There were certainly pros. I think now, in hindsight, looking at sort of my upbringing, I'm hugely grateful for what I was given and what I was able to sort of see. But growing up in Tottenham, I think overall, the word that comes to mind was challenging. You very quickly realise that the things that matter in life is family, friends, good relationships, and people that really care about you, you know. That is what ultimately sort of matters in life. But it was challenging. It was very hard. I mean, there was a time growing up in Tottenham, particularly sort of my time, where we had the highest unemployment rate in London. Just under 60% of young people were unemployed. You had poor housing, overcrowding, schools were being closed left, right and centre, no opportunities. It was tough. And as a result, a lot of people, particularly sort of young men, were thinking about, okay, what is the alternative? How do I put food on the table? How do I support my family? You know, and that was the constant theme. So it was hard. On top of that, you had sort of crime rates were obviously high. Things were happening. I think come back from school, you always had to check your shoulders. But then, I say on the flip side, because of all of that, I think, as I said, you have a strong sense of community. You have real relationships with some of your friends and your peers. Hopefully, if you can, if you're lucky enough, you've got a good family set up, and that means the world to you. And I think from early on, you just mature very quickly, because life comes at you very, very quickly. And as a result, you just have to sort of adapt very quickly. One of the things that I think certainly helped me in growing up in an area like Tottenham is sort of my faith. I was very fortunate to have gone to a very good school there, primary school there, and went off to a secondary school not too far out from Tottenham. But I think my faith very much kept me sort of grounded and rooted. And I think that certainly helped, you know. And again, like what I was saying before, I think having sort of these things in your life, whether it's your faith, whether it's family, I think it really does sort of help you through tough times. And when you are having to grow up in such challenging environments. So, it was an interesting sort of process, but I wouldn't change it for the world, regardless.
So how did your childhood experience influence who you are now as a person?
I think the line of work that I'm in right now I think that definitely stems from my upbringing. I think seeing the injustices that I saw growing up, as I said before, sort of low household incomes, overcrowding, parents having to do 2-3 jobs that you see in your peers, parents having to do so many roles just to keep afloat. And I think for me, it was clear where it just dawned on me where I realised we have to do something about this. And if we can't rely on local and central government to do this, I have to do it. There was a real sense of duty and obligation for me to step up and do this. And I think that stemmed from sort of my secondary school experience. I went to St Ignatius College in Enfield, and that definitely sort of made me understand that there was a role for me to play. I mean, the school mottos there was be men for others. And what that meant was, how do you take sort of values, the Christian values, into the world that I live? So for me, it was a case of how do I sort of begin to really sort of shape the society that I want to see and live in. I wanted to see how we can really live in a world where people are treated sort of equally and people are respected. I think that pretty much sort of really shapes the person that you see today.
So take me back to the Tottenham riots. What was it like seeing your community on fire every day?
It's a feeling that, honestly, you just can't explain. I think I was really young when the first riots happened in Tottenham. So you had the Broadwell Farm riot. So I didn't really have much of an experience with that. But this 2011 Tottenham riots was a feeling you just honestly can't explain. I actually went onto Tottenham High Road with a good friend of mine post riots when we walked through it. And honestly, like, it was almost like a numbing feeling that you sort of experience once walking through the area. Honestly, I just couldn't put into words sort of how I felt. And then seeing sort of the buildings burn down and no one sort of doing anything about it. And I use that very intentionally when I say no one was prepared to do anything about it, because there was then an inquiry afterwards and we understood that the police didn't allow the fire brigades to come out for over an hour, which was crazy, but I think reinforces why people were frustrated and angry about sort of the conditions that they were living in. Because for many years, and decades, should I say, people felt as if they couldn't trust and rely on sort of hierarchy, whether that was sort of local, central government or people in authority. And people, as a result, acted the way they did in 2011. Now, certainly not here to condone such behaviour, but I think people were clearly frustrated. But in terms of going back onto the question that you posed, in terms of what was it like and the feeling, I think there was a combination of feelings. There was hurt, there was pain, disappointment, frustration. It was tough. Certainly not a feeling I want to experience again. Yeah.
Did you ever feel like you wanted to get out of Tottenham?
Yeah, that was, I think, the aim for a lot of people growing up in Tottenham. Now we've seen the area sort of change so much over the last couple of years, post-riots actually. But prior to that, the aim was to leave Tottenham. Once you secured a relatively good job or a job that allowed you to sort of move, that was the first thing a lot of people did. Football was definitely sort of the initial plan that I had. I saw my brother play football at a high level, so I wanted to follow suit. But that didn't really work out. At sort of 16, I sort of packed it all in. And the route was then to sort of focus on my education and see what sort of the Lord is calling me to do. And that's when I stumbled across community organising. And I think that changed my life. That was a way for me to really inform sort of my faith and the injustices that I saw. But I say that, I then pursued a career in the private sector, being property. But in the midst of doing that, I was still heavily involved in organising. And that's when I pivoted into sort of focusing more on my work in community organising.
So you had that experience of growing up in Tottenham, and then you also had the experience of going to a Jesuit school. What stood out to you about that experience in light of the living experience you were going through at the time?
I think the word that comes to mind is hope. We sometimes don't have the luxury to have sort of things around us to be able to address sort of social inequalities. And I was quite fortunate to have that through my faith. And the two core sort of elements and themes of the Jesuit sort of order, should I say, is education and charitable work. And I was fortunate enough to be able to access both education in terms of going to Jesuit school and then charitable work. But I think we can go beyond that and say justice. And I think we were able and fortunate to do that. And I say we in terms of the cohort in my year group at the time were able to get involved with Citizens UK, who are a civil society alliance, an alliance of your pillars of the community. So whether that's your church, your mosque, your synagogue, schools, universities, who come together and try address sort of social injustices in neighbourhoods. And we were one of the founding members of North London Citizens. And we were able to address sort of the London riots, particularly sort of Tottenham riots, and really find out sort of the causes and the effects, but most importantly, solutions. How do we move forward from what happened? So I think, I was quite fortunate to have that. And I think just being able to really be a student at St. Ignatius and really understanding sort of what it really meant to be sort of a Catholic, a Jesuit, and really sort of go through that experience. I think a real sense of hope.
Did you ever consider with your Jesuit education to become a Jesuit?
It's an interesting one because, like, obviously going to Jesuit school, you're always thinking about sort of how to live out your Christian sort of values in your life. And it was actually sort of a young Jesuit that I met only a few years ago is when I realised, okay, He's quite young. I think we're even a similar age. He was actually in his 20s. And I think that's when it sort of dawned on me. And I was thinking, just with some of the things that was happening in my life as well, certainly something that I've thought about. And that's largely because of sort of the work and line of work that I'm in. And I think it aligns with sort of being a Jesuit is, you know. I wouldn't say that I haven't ever thought about it. I certainly have thought about it. It's not a decision that I've made just yet. But we wait and see. We wait and see for sure.
What have you done instead, career-wise, instead of being a Jesuit?
Okay. So I pursued a career in property for about 10 years and then pivoted into more community organising and working there. But as I said before, I'd always been involved in organising. So my first sort of route into organising was with Citizens UK. And then I had a unique opportunity to advise on a European funded project looking at youth unemployment across Europe before coming back to London and continuing my work in sort of organising and also in the private sector. And then recently, I say recently, about for the last sort of 5 to 6 years, been working with CTC, which is the Centre of Theology and Community, and looking at how we support our churches to have more of an impact within their community, as well as that currently working with Jesuits in Britain and looking at how we support people from the African diaspora, particularly in London, and thinking about what that looks like. And I've been doing that for the last couple of years and thoroughly enjoy being involved in this work and looking at how dynamic it is, but really being part of some real significant change. But ultimately, sort of understanding that this is what I feel anyway we've been called to do. We've been called to serve and serve those around us. And I think it really sort of helps me contextualize sort of my faith and what it means to be a Catholic, what it meant to go to a Jesuit school and what my teachers and the priests that were there always used to sort of say, which is men for others. And I think the prayer is one that always sort of resonates with me: to serve as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost. What does that really mean? What does that look like? And I genuinely feel as if like I'm living that out. I'm really living that out in terms of whether it's at CTC, whether that's through the work that I'm doing with Jesuits in Britain. I genuinely feel as if I'm living that out. So currently that's what my work looks like. As well as that, I run a social enterprise, which looks at how we really support young people from challenging backgrounds and help them begin to think about what are the tools and mechanisms they need to really thrive. As well as that, I run a community as well, which looks at supporting, young professionals in different experiences that they can sort of get involved in. So I think through all of the different sort of work that I'm doing, I genuinely feel as if I'm living out my calling anyway, and my true vocation. Yeah. That
was what I was going to ask you. In that time of career change, did you feel God's presence in it?
100%. 100%. I definitely feel as if I've been quite fortunate, I would say, over the last sort of couple of years to really listen to what God's calling me to do and where the Lord is calling me to be. And I think that could be hard. But I think for me, it started with prayer, being able to sort of have time to just pray and be still and to have that alone time, and I can see that. So with all the work that I'm doing, that after sort of a piece of work that I've done or whether it's sort of an engagement that I've been part of, it reinforces that this is what I've been called to do. And God has clearly guided me to be in here. And I think it all makes sense from what I'm doing now to sort of what I was very passionate about, which I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation. It's clear that the Lord has always been sort of guiding me, but most importantly, I can see that. I can very much see that.
At one point, we discussed how success looks like being a footballer. What does success mean to you now?
Good question. Good question. Success for me now, I think ultimately is, so how am I able to serve those around me? I think that is definitely, at the top of the list for me to sort of serve just like what the Lord calls us to do and in whatever capacity I'm called to do. I think ultimately that's at the top of my list. And I think when I look at everything that I'm involved in, that is pretty much at the heart of everything that I do. It's service, it's to serve. I think behind that, there are some personal sort of things there as well. I think that's to sort of be the best version of myself for those around me, to really love those around me, to be able to be in a space and to be in a headspace where I'm able to not only love, but to have grace for those around me. Because as I said before at the beginning of the conversation, I think growing up in an area like Tottenham, I think family and sort of friends and community means so much to me. So how can I show up the best version of myself? And I think lastly as well, is to really address the things that I wasn't happy with growing up. And I think I'm on the path of doing that, whether that's sort of addressing the hardship that people from my community went through. So I think the work that I'm doing with Jesuits in Britain at the moment in looking at how we support people from the African and Caribbean diaspora, I think is a piece of work that I'm so passionate about, because I think that is addressing sort of not only work that I think is vital, but generations to come. This ain't just for me. This ain't just for sort of my peers, but this is for families that are going to live in Tottenham moving forward, or in London in general. So I'm extremely passionate about that. And I think if I'm able to sort of address the hardship that they go through, that's definitely success for me. I think as well as that is a lot of the work that I'm doing at CTC and supporting our young people, really understanding sort of the role their faith plays in their life. I think I'm hugely grateful for sort of my faith, but the opportunities that's come with that, because that's allowed me to be able to sort of not only do what I've done, but has also allowed me to understand so what is actually important in life. And that's to have a strong sense of faith and to know how to inform sort of your faith. As I always say, it's not about what you do, it's about how you do what you do. And that really comes from sort of your faith. I've always done things with a real level of sort of grace, love, attention to detail. And that ultimately comes from sort of my faith. I remember sort of being at school and one of the teachers would always say, Mr. Dawson, I want to sort of big up Mr. Dawson anyway on the podcast, it's only right. And I remember he would always be big on sort of presentation. To be specific, your top button. And now, in hindsight, looking back at that, I know exactly what he meant by that. It's because how you do one thing is how you do everything. If you present yourself in a certain way, you've come ready, prepared to work, to do things. And so with the work that I'm doing at CTC and with the young people is to really understand that your faith is so dynamic. It contributes to so many different parts of your life. And how are they really able to understand that you could be someone that's so rooted in your faith and what it means to be a Christian. But that doesn't mean that you have to sort of be a Jesuit. That doesn't mean you have to be a priest. But you can go and be a lawyer. You could be an accountant. But that doesn't take away from the fact that your faith still plays a massive part in your life. And I think that's what I've been able to do. And for me, success really looks like how we're able to support young people in really understanding that. I'm sure there's other things, but clearly these are the three most important, hence why they came to mind.
How do you teach young people or support young people so that they know they have agency?
I think we do that through, journeying with them. There's a real sense of journeying and accompaniment with young people. Young people growing up, there's a lot that's thrown at them. They're being told so many different things. They don't really have much of a say. So how are we able to journey and accompany our young people? And what I mean by that is being able to really hold their hand on this journey of life, on this journey of faith as well. How are we able to hold their hand through life and be able to sort of guide them and steer them and not necessarily tell them how to do things, but journey with them, accompany them, really sort of show them. And I've seen they responded really well to that. Young people really want to be able to see how their faith has relevance in their life, seeing how current affairs apply to their faith. How are we able to have these honest conversations? Because I know growing up, I wasn't really able to do that up until I got involved in organising, to be at the forefront of an inquiry into the Tottenham riots, to address the fact that we had the highest unemployment rate in London at the time. This is what it looks like. This is what it means to address a housing situation where we had poor housing, to be able to support local people to secure housing there. That's what it looks like. So for me, it's really being able to really for us to support young people in terms of informing their faith, but then journey with them. How we're able to journey with our young people, because they're clearly passionate about their faith. They're clearly passionate about being better versions of themselves. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in these spaces, whether it's at church, whether it's at school. They wouldn't be here. They wouldn't really want to show that level of engagement. So there's clearly something placed in their heart. What we now need to do is support them on that journey. And do you ever look at young people now and think, I can see my younger self in that person? All the time, all the time. And It's an interesting one because I think there sometimes has to be sort of a level of let them go on their journey, you know. But yeah, I see that all the time. Honestly, I wouldn't say there's so many mini Edwards, not at all, but I do sometimes see a bit of myself in some of these young people. But again, I think that's what gives me hope. That's what makes me realize that, okay, they are going to go on this journey and they're clearly going to sort of be able to sort of see what I'm talking about. And I think this is why conversation like this is so important, because I was able to have mentors and coaches and sort of people around me who were able to really support me on my journey. And I hope and pray that this is an opportunity for other young people where I see sort of a bit of myself in them to be able to sort of listen to conversations like this, or to be in spaces where they're able to sort of pick up and understand sort of how to navigate. I think we often talk about epistemology, and by definition, that means to gain knowledge through experience. So I think it's only right that we share sort of our experiences for young people to be able to pick up from what we experience and how we're able to navigate, because that's how they're ultimately going to be able to gain knowledge. So yeah.
It sounds like you're paying it forward. I don't know if you've ever seen that film, but I was really influenced by that.
No.
You should. It's about, I won't go into it too much, but it's about a young child who decides he's going to do one thing to help 3 different people, and then they wouldn't pay it back to him, they would pay it forward, and then it's like starting off a movement. It's great, you should go watch it. What I want to know though is, are there any challenges in being a man for others?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. It's a tough one. I wouldn't necessarily say challenges. I would more say it's just really supporting young people, young men, really, or young boys, should I say, in understanding what that really means. Because of course there can be some connotations attached to sort of patriarchy, which can be quite sort of damaging to society. So really understanding sort of what men for others means and what does that sort of really look like. And so I think we just got to be very sort of careful in supporting young boys in terms of what that means and what that really looks like, and really being able to live that out and show them. And I was quite fortunate to be able to sort of do that, to really understand what it meant, the term men for others. Now I'm a governor at St. Ignatius now, and now we've got a mixed sixth form. So I understand now it's men and women for others. Because ultimately, it was obviously an all-boys school, but I think in any case, men for others essentially mean all of us really, men and women. I think what the word that comes to mind, as I've sort of repeated in this conversation, is to serve those around us, to love those around us, to journey with those around us. So I think definitely being very careful with making sure that we're able to support young boys, just so that they really understand it's for us to be able to serve those around us, to really live out sort of our Christian values. So I think, I wouldn't say, as I said before, a challenge. I'd more say it's more a case of us really making sure that we educate and support them.
So you obviously are doing a lot. How do you balance it all?
Ooh, that's a good question. And a lot of people do ask me the same thing, actually. So amongst all the things that I do, I definitely try and prioritize time to rest, so that I am able to do all of these different things. I think that's very important. And recently I was informed that I need to rest a little bit more. So I would encourage anyone who's juggling things to definitely rest and prioritize that, because that allows you to be able to do the many things that we've been called to do. But I think there's the other things that allow me to do what I'm doing, and how do I juggle all of these things, I think is being able to prioritize other things outside of the things that I'm passionate about. So hobbies. So I run a lot. I'm very big on sport. I still play football. I run. So I recently did the London Marathon. I'm in the process of planning a few other races and potentially a High Rocks. So I'm very much big on trying to prioritize time to do other things. But then I think someone will probably listen to it and think, well, how do you fit all of that in as well? But I think it's just rest. It's just really trying to have a good schedule. That's something that I was taught and told very on, to really have a schedule that allows you to do the many things that you want to do. So I go on a lot of retreats as well, actually. A lot of people don't know that, actually. But I do go on a lot of retreats. So I was on a retreat, last week. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? So yeah, retreats are something that I've recently been able to go on. And I travel a lot. I know that I'm going to be taking time out. I love traveling the world, so that allows me to do that. So I'll definitely say have quite a strict schedule, but a schedule that's not too strict, that doesn't allow you to do things, that incorporates sort of other things. Yeah, so that's what allows me to be able to do the many things and the many hats that I have.
So what do you wish you knew earlier about faith, leadership and purpose?
It's a tough one, because if I knew all of this before, I probably wouldn't have lived out everything the way I did. I watched Conclave not too long ago, and I remember there was a bit in the film where they were talking about mystery is necessary in faith. We need sort of mystery in faith, because ultimately with mystery is what gives us faith, because we don't know what's going to happen, and ultimately that's what gives us that overall faith. So to be honest, I wouldn't want to know. I've loved the fact that I've been able to go on this journey, but I think I wish I knew that it would inform sort of every bit of my life, every single part of my life. I think my Jesuit education and sort of my faith and being a Catholic has informed every sort of bit of my life, whether that's sort of relationships, whether that's sort of the career path that I've decided to go into or I was thinking about, whether that's being able to sort of work on some of the initiatives and campaigns that I've worked on. It's really sort of informed everything. And I wish I knew that it wasn't sort of one part of my life, that my faith was so dynamic, you know, as I sort of mentioned before. And it's really going to inform most of the decisions that you make. And ultimately, I'm not in control of that. The Lord is ultimately in control of that. I often say, I think there's a saying that I say, you pray to run for the bus and then you run as fast as you can. And I wish that I knew all I can do is just run as fast as I can and just pray to make the bus. And I think that really does encapsulate my life, in the sense of sort of, I can't guarantee what's going to happen. That's for the Lord to dictate. But what I can do is to be the best version of myself and to serve those sort of around me. And that's all I can take care of. That's all I can control. And I wish I knew that earlier. But to be honest, I love the journey that I'm going on.
So what are you most grateful for?
I'm grateful for my faith. I think I've said that sort of in the conversation, but I'm definitely so grateful for sort of my faith and how that's supported me through the good times and the not so good times. I'm grateful for family. I think I've been extremely fortunate to have a family that are supportive, have been there, have shown me the way, and my parents are sort of two people that have introduced me to my faith, and I've never really looked back. Hugely grateful for my brothers who have been huge supporters in my journey. Do you know what? I'd say it's a combination of how we started this conversation in terms of my community. I think through growing up in Tottenham, it's made me sort of have a certain perspective in life. And it's really tied into the Ignatian prayer, which is to serve as you deserve. I think growing up in Tottenham and seeing what I saw, I'm just hugely grateful for being able to see that, be involved in that, and now say, okay, I'm sort of ultimately for just trying to bring about change in not only in London, but where I see sort of an injustice, you know. And I'm hugely grateful for that being sort of not only my passion, but connected to sort of my faith and who I am as an individual, you know. And that's allowed me to work on all of the different things that I've mentioned sort of before. So yeah, I'm just hugely grateful for family, my faith, and yeah, and sort of for my community, really.
Thanks for listening to Things I Wish I Knew. What's going to stay with me in this episode is how Edward seems to make his decisions by discerning with God. How about you? We'd love to hear how Edward's story resonated with you. And why not also tell us if you're facing an experience you wish you knew how to look at differently? It might just be something we can help with. You can find out more about this theme and others at thinkingfaith.org. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you'll join me again next time on Things I Wish I Knew.